Hi, everyone. We still have a few people logging in and getting connected, so we'll give them just a minute or two to get started. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Link Center today for this shared learning group focused on the topic of communication in clinical settings. I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items while we get started today. The session is being recorded, and the recording and resources will be made available on our website. We welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share it with others. Attendees cannot see the names of other attendees, and all attendees are muted. Please use the chat function in Zoom to communicate with other attendees and the hosts during the webinar. You can use the chat by clicking on chat at the bottom of your screen. And please be aware that your name will appear in the chat if you make a comment. And if you'd like, you can change your display name by clicking on those three little dots next to your name and selecting rename. We will have representatives from the Link Center watching the chat and responding throughout the session today. If you'd like to submit a question or a comment privately to the host or panelist, you can do that by clicking on the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We have live captioning and ASL interpreters present today. We will be spotlighting the active speaker and ASL interpreter throughout the webinar. If you click on View on your Zoom screen, you can change the way you see the panelists. And if you're having any trouble with your view, you can let us know in the Q&A and we'll try to help. At this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to Dr. Stacy Nonamaker, who will start today's presentation. Stacy, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Really excited to be with you all today. We are the Link Center, a collection of partners, some of whom you will see today. But we are working together to improve mental health access for people with disabilities. We are funded through the Administration for Community Living and really looking forward to talking about today's topic, communication in clinical settings. I'm going to go through some housekeeping things before I turn it over to my colleagues to jump into this topic. And the first being that we're incredibly excited that we have a new website. So we continue to say, check us out if you haven't checked us out yet. Check back often because we're constantly updating, putting new resources and information on our website. You will find information from today's shared learning group on our website after today, as well as other shared learning groups that we've done in the past and future shared learning groups as well. So you can use that QR code or the link that's on your screen, www.thelinkcenter.org. So we'd love to know who's joining us today. If I see people are saying hello already in the chat. That's so wonderful. If you want to pop your name in there, if you are with an organization or any affiliation that you want to share with us, that would be great. But we also have, as you're saying hello in the chat, we also have just a quick live poll with two questions. We'll put that up on your screen now. The first one is we're interested in knowing what role best describes you. I know that we all wear multiple hats. On any given day, could be different hats, but today, how are you showing up and in what role? And also, we love to know where you're tuning in from. Today, I'm tuning in from my home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So I'll give it just a couple minutes to let you complete the poll. Great. Looks like we have mostly family members joining us. Today's information is targeted to family members. However, we understand people's lives are very full and busy, and we invite everyone and anyone to join us. And we see that there's other folks, direct support professionals, clinical professionals joining us today. So welcome. We do just a little bit about our shared learning groups for those of you who may not know. We host 4 shared learning groups per quarter, focus on 4 different audiences: direct support professionals, clinical professionals, families right now. And later on today, we're going to be talking to people with lived experience. And the topic is always the same. The information mostly is the same, but we do tailor talking points and content for those audiences. As I mentioned earlier, the Link Center generally is a collaboration of many partners, and the content and information today is a collaboration reflective of those partners. Some of our partners are people with lived experience. We have researchers and also people who work on policy issues. As Stephanie mentioned today, we are recording and transcribing today's meeting, meaning that we'll have a collection of all the words that people say in the meeting, and we'll share the materials after the meeting. We do encourage you to pay attention to the chat. We'll be dropping a lot of information in there as well throughout today. So I like to put the emphasis on shared in the shared learning group because our goals today is to share with you things that we have been thinking about as the Link Center around communication in clinical settings. We want to share with you some resources around this topic. And then we're hoping to spend some time to hear from you all in response to example situations, your experience, your perspective on this topic. As part of the Link Center, we have a steering committee comprised of 14 people with very lived experience who are across the United States, and they help us, really, they guide all the work here at the Link Center, but they help us specifically with the shared learning group topics, content. And one of the things that early on they identified is that it's really helpful if we start with some agreements or foundation in these shared learning groups. And so some of them we have here that we want to go through quickly. The first one is take care of yourself, do what is necessary for your comfort and care. We should be gentle with ourselves and each other because sometimes this is hard work to do. Sometimes the topics we talk about may be difficult for some or even triggering for some. We celebrate that we are all individuals from different backgrounds. We celebrate that we have shared experiences to learn from, and we know that we are each unique with our own experiences in this world. And finally, this is the shared learning part of the shared learning group. We listen and we share with open minds and kindness. We do not judge or blame others for what they share. We want this to be an open place where we show patience and grace with one another. So today's topic was and is very important to our steering committee. They've shared many, many stories around communication in clinical settings, from generally not feeling heard or respected, experiencing lots of diagnostic overshadowing or being seen in clinical settings in one way. They've shared stories about having to repeat their experiences over and over again, and how sometimes that leads to medical trauma. So we're glad that we are able to talk about this topic with you today, and we hope to start this discussion starting to change experiences that people are having in clinical settings. And let me just quickly define what we mean by clinical settings. We think of this as places where medical services, think diagnosing, treatment, and care is happening. And we think about primary care and family doctors. We think about therapists and counseling offices when we think about clinical settings. And so today we, are gathered here to focus on how can we support people, perhaps our loved ones, to have better experiences in these clinical settings. And we'll share some stories. We'll have some positive experiences. We'll talk about understanding communication rights. And we have some resources that we're going to share for you that, it will hopefully make for a better experience for others. If anything that we shared today doesn't make sense to you, or you have questions or comments, please put that in the chat and we'll take the time to talk through that as well. So, given that this is what we're aiming to talk about today, just one more quick question for you all that will pop up on your screen before we begin. The question is, how would you rate your knowledge about communication in clinical settings right now? Not at all knowledgeable, slightly knowledgeable, moderately knowledgeable, very knowledgeable, or extremely knowledgeable. You consider yourself a subject matter expert. So let me just give you a minute or so to complete this. So it's helpful for us as presenters to know where you are, what your relationship is with this topic. So again, if you could just take just 1 second. All right. So now I get to remind you all, as we always do with the shared learning groups, that if you have any information, training, resources, just places that you go to when you're thinking about communication in clinical settings in general, please pop those in the chat. We'd love to elevate those on our website. If you feel like there's gaps in information, please let us know that as well. It's something for us to consider as partners in the Link Center. I get to turn it over now to Andrea Whitwer, along with Braden Gertz and Christine Brown, our partners from the Ohio State University, going into the acronym right away there, and the Nice Center. So, Andrea, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. It's so nice to meet all of you. I am Andrea Whitwer. I'm a middle-aged white woman with brown short hair, glasses, and a white shirt on. And I'm going to just kind of kick off this whole idea of clinical communication with some conversations that I had with both Braden and Christine to really talk about what are some ways that communication can go well in a clinical setting, and hear how that's going from Braden, and then hear about some challenges and the implications of breakdowns in communication from Christine. So first, let's hear a little bit of my conversation that I was able to have a few weeks ago with Braden about how he approaches his appointments.
Hi, Braden. Thanks for agreeing to be interviewed and to share your process to make your medical appointments go smoothly.
Yeah.
Can you start by telling me what you do before an appointment to prepare for it?
Okay, so I check my chart. I use pre-registration, write down the questions for the doctor, and write down the goals for the appointment.
Wow, that's wonderful. Do
Yep.
you go to appointments by yourself or does someone go with you?
So my dad used to come with me, but passed away. Sometimes mom comes, and mostly go by myself.
I'm really sorry to hear about your dad. When you do go to the doctor's office, what does the doctor do to help you feel more heard and respected?
So I get nervous with the doctor, but he listens to me.
Yeah. And what else does he do to help you feel like help you with the appointments?
Like let's say use eye contact helps me pay attention better.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I know you and I've talked about that before, that making eye contact and the doctor making eye contact with you helps you. I know sometimes that can make other people feel uncomfortable, but it's great that you know that about yourself.
Yes.
I was wondering how you make sure you remember the advice that the doctor gives you.
So I write my own notes during the appointment.
Okay, so you like to write out what the doctor says so that you can remember
Yes.
it in the future. All right. And then what do you do after the visit?
I check the after visit summary in my chart.
Yeah, I remembered you sharing that you like to do both of those things, that you feel like just like eye contact helps you pay attention, that
Yes.
writing it down helps you remember what the doctor's saying. But then you
Yeah.
go back in and you've learned how to log into my chart and check that after visit summary to make sure that has everything too.
Yes.
It sounds like you have a really clear process for what you do before your doctor visit, during your visit, and after your visit. How did
Yes.
you learn to do all of this, Braden?
So let's see. I practiced with my parents, and Dr. Hanks taught me how to use my chart.
Oh, that's great. So it sounds
Yes.
like kind of going over stuff with your parents ahead of time. And then how great that Dr. Hanks helped you learn how to use my chart so that you could use it so well.
Yep.
Thanks a lot for sharing all of this with
No
us, Braden.
problem.
I think it'll be really helpful for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I love Braden kind of walking us through how he's able to use my chart to help with planning before the visit, after, and how he's really worked with his medical team to figure out what is the communication style and those things that really work well for him. The next person we're going to hear from is Christine Brown. And Christine's going to talk a little bit about some challenges she had previously when she was transitioning from pediatric to adult care and some breakdowns in communication and how that really led to some challenges for her and her family.
Hi, Christine. Thanks so much for agreeing to be here and to share your kind of tough story about an experience that you had with a healthcare provider. I'll go ahead and let you share your experience.
Thanks. So I had a really bad experience around the time I was changing from a pediatric neurologist to an adult neurologist. The new doctor switched my medication without tapering me off the other, which messed with my seizures. And then I had 3 grand mal seizures over 2 days. This was a long time ago, so it's hard to remember, but I kind of remember there being an allergy with the new medication too. I went to the ER with my dad, who had to advocate for me to get help I needed. Thankfully, there was a specialist in seizure disorders that was able to intervene and get me help. Once I was stable, I was able to go home. However, I started having psychiatric issues and had to be help admitted to the OSU psych unit for several weeks and was diagnosed with psychosis secondary to seizure disorder. During this, my family was going through a lot of stress. My mom had cancer and surgery at the Cleveland Clinic during that time. So it was up to dad and to have to support all of us. I think it's really important for doctors to pay attention to things like allergies and medications, which when they get new patients, again, check the medicine the patients could be allergic to. This mess up caused me to have seizures and psychosis and to be hospitalized. It was really bad experience that sticks with me even today.
Wow, thanks so much for sharing that, Christine. There are a lot of points in there I think are important. What I'm hearing from you is that it's important that records get transferred when we go from pediatric to adult care, and that the new doctor really review those records carefully, and that we work with young adults to be able to advocate for themselves with these things. Another part I heard from you is that it's important for mental health providers to realize how significant medications can be in causing some mental health conditions in addition to helping. So it's important to realize that medications and their side effects can sometimes be the cause of mental health conditions. Thanks again for sharing that story. There was a lot in there that's important for our audience to think about.
Yeah, and I think we just want to kind of think about these stories as we hear about communication and talk about resources and really trying to think about how to best support everybody, right? So the adult with ID, the family, and really helping make sure that you guys are all feel comfortable advocating with the doctor and trying to really work on getting providers to stop and listen and think about all of the aspects of the individual and what they're going through. So with that, I think in keeping these stories in mind, this is a nice time to turn it over to my colleague, Tana Szymanski, who will talk about communication.
Thank you, Andrea. My name is Tana Szymanski. I am the Executive Director and Legal Director of Communication First. Happy to be here. We're a partner with the Link Center. Communication First, for those who don't know, is the nation's only civil rights organization that is led by and for what we estimate to be about 5 million people, children and adults in this country who can't rely on speech alone to be heard and understood. It's a very diverse community with many different causes for speech-related disabilities, and of course we're disability-led. And one thing we always try to emphasize is that the vast majority of people in our population still, unfortunately, do not have access to robust language-based communication tools and supports. Just to give you some images of our organization, some of the people involved. If you know who Judy Heumann was, a very well-known disability rights activist, she was a founding board member. My co-founder was Bob Williams. He recently retired, sadly, but is still around. Other folks on here, Alice Wong also is a very well-known disability rights activist. She was on our advisory council and also passed away last year. Just a few other folks on our board, Lateef McLeod, Tim Jin, Pancho Ramirez. And in the bottom, there's a photo of me with my boss, Jordan Zimmerman, who's an AAC user, us at the White House a couple of years ago. On the screen now is an infographic that we created to try to show visually the diversity of our community in terms of the causes for speech-related disability. So there's a bunch of different boxes of different colors and different sizes, and the largest box actually says autism, 3.1 million. Then the next largest box says aphasia, 2.5 million. And then there's other boxes that are smaller that say Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, ALS, etc. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but it just gives you a sense of how diverse our community is. So we seek to represent people who are both born with a speech-related disability and who acquire one later. in life. So one thing we like to emphasize when we're talking about the advocacy side of things, especially in the healthcare context, is that people with speech-related disabilities or people who can't speak at all, sometimes these people are called nonverbal or non-speaking. They are people who have communication disabilities. I've always found it very interesting that people who have vision or hearing disabilities, which are the other two major communication disabilities, tend to identify with those disabilities as being blind or deaf or hard of hearing. But people in our community don't tend to primarily identify with their communication disability. Potentially cultural reason for that, not sure. But it's important when advocating to recognize that people with speech disabilities, they may have other types of disabilities like IDD or mental health or physical disabilities, but they also have a communication disability, and that's important for legal reasons, which I'll get into in a minute. So before we get into the legal side of things, in the healthcare context, it's always really important to remember that one of the most important ethical foundations for medical and healthcare providers, which is their obligation to seek and obtain from each patient informed consent. And that really applies regardless of any legal obligation they may have, whether the patient is subject to guardianship or not, and regardless of whether they may have a communication disability, there's still an ethical obligation for the doctor or the nurse or the dentist to inform the patient about the proposed courses of medical treatment, and then to give them the opportunity to ask questions to make sure they're fully informed, and then to make a decision about those options that might be available to them. So this is very central to doctors and other healthcare providers in the United States, and it's in the American Medical Association Code of Medical Ethics. So this applies regardless of any legal obligation to communicate with patients. In addition to that, there are several laws that protect the rights of people with various disabilities in the United States. And even in addition to that, almost all of those disability rights laws specifically call out communication as being a very important aspect and a very important right of people with disabilities. So in addition to the right not to be discriminated against as a person with a disability, there's also an obligation to ensure that there's effective communication with the person. So this recognizes just how important communication is to existing as a human being. And in the healthcare context, communication is especially important, in part due to the informed consent and the important interactions between patients and healthcare providers, of course. So just as I said, just like people with vision and hearing disabilities, people with speech disabilities also require and are entitled legally to communication-related accommodations if they need them in healthcare settings. I always like to step back and just make sure people have a comprehensive understanding of what communication is. I think unless you're sort of steeped in this on an everyday basis, most people don't think about how broad communication can be. And this is, even though I work now in this field professionally, it really took a lot of experience in the early part of the COVID period advocating for patients for me to really fully realize how broad communication really is. In addition to expressing things, which is what I think most people, when they think about someone's ability to communicate, can they speak, can they say yes or no, etc., can they write? There's also, communication also includes the ability or the skill of receiving or perceiving information. So that includes seeing, reading, hearing, listening, and even touching or feeling. So that's a receptive form of communication. It also includes processing and understanding information, which is also a form of receptive and also cognitive communication. Of course, the asking questions to clarify understanding as an aspect of communication. And then, of course, again, expressing decisions, preferences, needs, desires, feelings, etc. And that could come in the healthcare context of informed consent, signing a document, communicating emotion through like an emoji and a text. It can also include non-language based forms of communication like pointing or facial expressions, looking at something, laughing and nodding. So these are all different types of communication to keep in mind when a person is in a healthcare setting and the types of communication accommodations they might or might not need. Also, this was something we learned during COVID. Also, communication can also include information that your body may be unconsciously or subconsciously expressing about your health, your physical or your emotional state. So like whether you're in pain, whether you're hungry or thirsty, whether you're nauseous or anxious or fearful or just uncomfortable. This came up in one example. We were advocating during COVID on behalf of a patient who was in an inpatient rehabilitation center, and that person was being denied access to loved ones who could have assisted him in communicating. He was in a mostly vegetative state, but was as an alternative to allowing his wife or fiance, I can't remember, and his mother to be there in person. They allowed him to FaceTime with them. And one of them noticed, even though he was in essentially a vegetative state, that his expression changed and the color of his skin changed. And they pointed this out to the nurses, and they said, "There's something wrong with him." And they were like, "Oh no, that's how that's his baseline. Nothing has changed." And they kept insisting and insisting and insisting. And saying, there's something wrong. We're seeing some, communication from him based on, how he's looking to us. And indeed, they did a scan and it turned out he had a stroke. So I like to use that example as also being included in a form of communication, even though it wasn't sort of willful on his part. It still was a form of communication that he clearly needed the support of someone else to understand and to communicate to others. So in addition to that sort of thing, you might need communication support if you have a communication disability to communicate other basic physical needs like the hunger, thirst, pain, and discomfort. It's also helpful to think about how other patients, non-disabled patients or residents in a facility, for instance, are able to communicate. So lots of people are given access to a call bell, but there are a lot of people who may have speech disabilities who also have motor disabilities with their hands, and they may not be able to ring that call bell. So if all the other patients are given access to a call bell, but this particular patient isn't able to use the call bell, then that patient should be entitled to have whatever assistance they may need to use that call bell, right? That is a form of communication in a healthcare setting, and that may require the assistance of another human being to communicate in that way. Can they call a loved one outside, for instance? Do they need support to do that? Do they need support to help ask questions, provide informed consent? And, in the example I just described, changes in baseline, again, communicating that, especially if someone isn't able to speak, just, if you've just been admitted, most of the time a healthcare provider is not going to know what that patient's baseline is, right? And so you're going to, in that context, that patient is almost certainly going to need someone who's familiar with the patient to know what that baseline is and to communicate that there's something different about the patient. And it's always important to keep in mind that we believe that most people who have been denied access to effective communication for any period of time should be assumed to have experienced some kind of trauma, whether it's medical related trauma, a distinct, episode, or long-term trauma due to the fact that they have not had access to a form of communication that enables them to be understood. So supporting someone in a stressful setting to accommodate that trauma is also could be a communication support aspect as well. Again, helpful to sort of think about when you're advocating, how are the non-disabled patients in a particular setting, healthcare setting, able to communicate and to try to ensure that your patient with a communication disability is able to have access to all those forms of communication that non-disabled patients have in that setting. Also, very important to keep in mind that you're not just thinking about just everyday, how someone might communicate in an everyday sort of regular setting. In healthcare settings, virtually everyone, even if you don't have a disability, is going to be a lot more stressed. And if you're in a healthcare setting, you may be in pain, right? That's a reason to go seek healthcare. So there may be multiple reasons why communication is going to be much more difficult for someone in a healthcare setting, pain and stress. So in those settings, it's always safe to assume that the patient is going to need additional support beyond what they normally might need at home and school and a job, etc. All right, so we're going to play a short video here, and I want to just let people know that it's going to be, none of it's sped up, right? So it's going to be slow for some parts of it, and we're going to play it at that speed deliberately just to so you can see, if you're not familiar with people who use augmentative and alternative communication or AAC, how difficult it can be to communicate with language.
The truth is we are working way harder to be heard than we get credit for
I want people to know that how I communicate is not strange, weird, or outlandish, but it is very straightforward. I communicate typing into an AAC app that is on my laptop, iPad, and I phoned him till the app speaks for me.
I have had cerebral palsy all my life. I am in a power wheelchair and use a speech generating device. I can access words in two ways, one by spelling and the other by stringing these symbols together. He brought a laser light, attached it to a baseball cap, and posted a letterboard with the alphabet on the wall before me. That way, when I needed to say something or the nurse had a question, they picked up the laser, pointed to the alphabet, and wrote everything down.
People are impatient and language moves fast. I hit the wrong buttons and forget where phrases are. But worst of all, I am automatically presumed to be incapable of tasks I am attempting to accomplish. Ableism is a real challenge.
Yeah, that was fun. I also like that because while the audience there's obviously people dedicated to improving the lives of people with disabilities.
My name is Tim Jin, and I live in Orange County, California. I'm a Korean American man who has cerebral palsy. I am using a communication device at the base of my wheelchair by typing with my toes.
Y, my, N, A, M, E, my name, I, is, N, I, K, O, Nico, B, O, S, K, O, V, I, C. I, A, M, T, W, E, N, T, Y, T, W, O, I'm 22, Y, E, A, R, S. I have news for you, Nico. You're not 22, you're 23. Wait, what year were you born? 2001. Oh, no, you're gonna be 23 this year. I'm sorry. I get it mixed up. I'm a mixed up. I mixed it up.
This is a technique.
This is a technique
called
revoicing.
Anything that helps cut down on the effort.
Anything that helps cut down on the effort
that I have to put in.
That I have to put in.
To communicate.
To communicate.
And the effort that people have to put in.
And the effort that people have to put in.
Will give you more time.
Will give me more time.
And less anxiety.
And less anxiety.
I don't want to just be in the room.
I don't want to just be in the room.
I want to have the opportunity to fully participate.
I want an opportunity to fully participate.
Okay, so that short video is really just designed to show folks just how diverse our community really is, and also that augmentative and alternative communication basically can include anything other than speech, right? And it's always going to be individualized. So all of those folks are in some way with Communication First, and it's my privilege to work with all of them. So one key takeaway I hope that you leave with today is that there's a really key distinction between speech and language. So speech is a motor function, whereas language is a cognitive function. These are two different things that are processed in different parts of the brain. On the slide, there's a graphic called Words in the Brain, and it shows just stylistically where different language and speech functions are generated. So what does that mean? It means that if you encounter someone who can't speak or who is having difficulty speaking, you can't assume anything about their capacity to understand or to learn or to use language. There's just no basis in anatomy to make that assumption. For some reason, a lot of people just assume that if you can't speak, you have a severe intellectual disability and or have a language disability. And there's just no basis in science or anatomy to make that assumption. So just keep that in mind as you're advocating for patients, especially in healthcare settings. There we go. So I also wanted to highlight, we have a number of resources on our website that are focused on healthcare, I think in part because we launched just a few months before the pandemic. So a lot of the initial work that we did as an organization was really focused on advocating on behalf of people in our community in healthcare settings. There's a fairly well-known AAC user named Endeavor Corbin, who has written very compellingly about their experiences, especially in mental health settings, about being a person who relies on AAC and about having had multiple experiences with institutions and providers taking away their communication tools and supports. And so just a couple of quotes. The link up here links to a longer guest blog that Endeavor wrote for us about some of the barriers that they have experienced in healthcare settings. But one of the things they point out is that not having a way to produce an audible no or stop makes someone incredibly vulnerable. And that when this happens in a medical setting, they've said it is terrifying. They point out that if the people in charge don't allow me to explain what's going on inside, what are they going to decide about whether I can leave the premises, quote unquote, need to be restrained or secluded, can consent to treatment or testing, can contact my friends, and about my other rights? And then another quote from that guest blog: you can't decide for a disabled person which forms of communication are going to work for them and when. Only the individual communicator can decide that. If I don't have autonomy over that choice, whatever authority took it away now has almost infinite power over me. I highly recommend reading the full blog by Endeavor. It's very compelling. And this is a graphic that accompanied the blog. It's a screenshot of Endeavor's high-tech communication device, where at the top of the image, there's a sentence that says, "Taking access and choice away is terrorizing." So this is really more geared toward providers, healthcare providers, and maybe disability support professionals, but also anyone who's an ally as well to folks in our community. And that's just really to point out what may be obvious to most people, but there's no sort of standardized form of augmentative or alternative communication or communication support for people with speech disabilities. So I know this isn't true for everyone in the deaf and blind communities, but American Sign Language and Braille are have become pretty common communication tools in those two communities. And we don't have anything similar in our community, in part because it's incredibly diverse. The people's access needs are very different. There's just we just don't have anything similar. So and the fact remains too is that due to assumptions about potentially the person's ability to learn and express language based on their speech disability, most of the people in our community have never been given access to what we call robust language-based AAC that works for them. Most don't have access to a way to be understood with language. So when you're in a position as a healthcare provider, for instance, or if you're a new disability support provider, ask how the patient communicates and what they might need to be able to communicate in the healthcare setting. How do they ask questions, and how do they provide informed consent? And as you may have gathered from the video that I played earlier, communicating with most AAC users takes a lot longer than it does to communicate with people who have fluent speech. So always a good idea to plan for additional time with the patient. It's also important to keep in mind that even if a person is really adept and experienced and fluent at using a device, for instance, almost all people are going to need a familiar person to accompany them in these settings. Just about all the people in that video are extremely fluent and adept at using AAC, but they have all, in healthcare settings, expressed that due to the stress and power differentials and other issues that we've touched on, there's almost always a need for another human being there, especially if the provider is unfamiliar with AAC users in general, but the patient and their communication needs in particular. Just another piece of work that we've done with AAC users in accessing healthcare. One of our first grants was called the ABCD Project. And this is also, I highly recommend this page, which is a bunch of quotes from AAC users who wrote out, advice for doctors and nurses and other healthcare providers. Just a few of them: talk to me normally and answer my questions. Please talk to me, not my aide. Doctors need to prioritize giving more time for communication. Often I need a communication support person because doctors don't want to take the time to read my write-up and process what I'm saying. All right, so very quickly on some of the legal aspects. There are 3 main federal laws that protect the rights of people with disabilities in healthcare settings. The first is the Americans with Disabilities Act. Title II governs state and local entities. And Title III governs private entities, private hospitals, for instance, but also individual doctors and dentist offices. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act governs any entity that receives any kind of federal funding, including if they take Medicaid or Medicare. And then Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act was specifically written for healthcare, the healthcare context. In addition to these federal laws, there's many states also have separate laws that protect people with disabilities. Some of those might be in the state constitution. Some might be in a separate human rights or disability rights statute. So those would apply as well as any federal laws that would apply. And then there's case law, which is law that courts essentially establish in their written opinions. And that may be more protective as well than any of these statutes or constitutions. I'm not going to go through the details of what these laws say. In general, the 3 statutes, the ADA, Section 504 and Section 1557, there's a lot of overlap in them because they all sort of draw on each other on disability rights and communication rights in particular. But essentially, the bottom line is that these laws require that healthcare entities and providers have to ensure that when they're dealing with people with disabilities, that the communication they engage in must be as effective as the communication they engage in with people without disabilities. There's a kind of wonky term that is used in the communication context called auxiliary aids and services. That's just essentially as a communication related accommodation. And these statutes always prioritize the disabled person's preferred form of communication. So for instance, a person may, a patient may say that they prefer to use American Sign Language, for instance, and the hospital might come back and say, oh no, we only provide CART, and so there might be, and this happens all the time, there might be a dispute about whether the hospital has to provide ASL or whether CART is acceptable. And the answer to that will depend on the circumstances, but in general, there's deference to the disabled person's expressed preferences. And it's really hard, in most of these contexts, for the provider to say no altogether, right? There's a lot they have to prove to say, oh no, we're not going to provide ASL or CART or whatever. We're not going to allow you to have access to your AAC. The laws are very strong with regard to communication rights for disabled people. I'm not going to read through all this. This is really in here for your resource, but these are some of the key quotes from the regulations, the communication related regulations. In addition to all that, I just wanted to share a bunch of resources. So the next few slides are really resources again for you all to take away. In the early part of COVID, in fact, I think 2 weeks, I think it was still March of 2020, we created a communication rights toolkit. It's still referred to as, I'll just share an image here, a screenshot, but it's the COVID-19 Communication Rights Toolkit now. It still applies regardless of COVID-19. We're working on revising our website and updating everything, so don't be confused, but people continue to use it anytime they go to a doctor's appointment or a hospital and need to request accommodations. But the page essentially explains legal rights in easy terms, what your rights are to communication in different healthcare settings. And then it includes at the bottom of the page this printable form that you can, print out or, and bring to appointments. Like here's about me, here's about my disabilities, here's how I communicate, and here's what I am requesting in terms of a communication related accommodation. So it's also available in Spanish and Chinese, and that page includes tips on how to advocate, how to file a complaint if needed, and then it has other resources for healthcare settings. The next few slides really just include resources. So these are legal and advocacy related resources, some of which we've created, some of which other partners and colleagues have created. I mentioned some of these already, the reflections on healthcare access from AAC users, Endeavor's blog, a couple of videos about why informed consent is important, and advice on how to talk with doctors, some training. Then we have some mental health specific links, including the last two bullets are resources we created as part of our collaboration with the Link Center about crisis plans and trauma. And then always encourage people, if you're new to AAC users and people who need AAC, to watch some short documentary films. We created a couple of these, but highly recommend all of them. Some resources on safety and safeguards. And then finally, the obligatory sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media, get a t-shirt. But I'm happy to take questions and now or later. And my email address is here. And now I'm happy to turn it back to, is it Andrea is next?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jana, for covering that such an important topic and giving such a great background. Very helpful for all of us. Now, Christine Brown is going to walk us through some other tools to help with communication, some that our team has developed and some from other teams. So she's going to walk you through them a little bit, and then I can share some other examples. But let's hear from Christine first.
So, hello everyone. Now I want to share some resources from the Charting the Life course and the Niswonger Center RRTC Disability Experience Expert Panel. While Charting the Life course has some very interesting tools, this is one of my favorites because it talks about what you want, what you don't want, and what you want to achieve. And this is a form that can be filled out and share with anyone, your doctor, your team, your mental health professional. And the other things you can do is having some people show their goals together, and then you give this to them at their team meeting, and that makes the goals for the service and support administrator or doctor to be much more clear, and half the homework has been done. So this is the Disability Experience Expert Panel that I co-chair. I'm going to share some of the resources that we developed. So the Mental Health Toolkit is one of the best items we created. A lot of family members and psychologists, psychiatrists, or even school psychologists really think these are great. This is a great tool to get to use for help. And so we really like how these have all the different things even in there about the examples of like how do people communicate best, talking, texting, requiring video, braille, or large print, and what kind of accommodations and what support when somebody fills this out before going to the doctor. It's like the pre-screen, so the doctor can know how to work with this patient even before they come and interview them. So it's like the pre-screening tool is what I call it. And then this therapy helper, this can help prepare for sessions with their therapists, review the session with the therapist and talk about what to practice after. So these are good tools to use, and it's important to make sure we have things in a everyone's learning style, auditorial, visual, kinesthetic, or the read and write personality. So that's a sample. That's the visual of this therapist session checklist. So before seeing the individual, seeing if you go through this checklist to see if you're meeting all the guidelines.
And this might be something that if you're an adult with ID or a family member, you could share with the therapist just for them to think about ahead of time, right, Christine? So it could be something therapists could use, but I think family members could share it with a therapist and say, hey, these are things I want you to think about too.
Yes. So this is the link for the RRTC products, and you have to click over to these mental health therapy products because this is not yet gone up to the IT level where you can say it and it goes to it. You still have to manually search. We're not that far into the technology yet.
Great. Thank you so much, Christine, for going over a lot of those resources. Hopefully folks will find them helpful. Yeah, so hopefully, like we said, hopefully these are helpful for you, for your family members, for yourself. I really, really like the mental health therapy toolkit as well as the therapy helper toolkits, because not only is it a way to help the individual communicate, their family to communicate, but it allows you and your provider to really be on the same page together. So just highlighting a few of the things that Christine talked about. If we look at the Charting the Life course, there was one screenshot on there of the like all about me sheet so that folks could fill it out and be able to take it to their provider with some of the basics. It's really a kind of a broad strokes type of a thing. But Christine also talked about some of the other great resources, such as the life trajectory, which is, if you look on here, it's kind of small, but you can see like, what is it that I want to happen? Let me see if I download it. And what do I not want to happen? So you can see there's a lot of great visual supports, things about what's important to you. What are the supports around me? Different ways that you can describe yourself. So I put the link to the Family Resource Network of Ohio's Life Course page, as well as the National Life Course page, just because they have a lot of great supports that can help you when you're working with your clinicians. And then also, just kind of as Christine said, when you go to our website and you click on the mental health therapy toolkits, there's also a lot of great other clear language products of our research that's in clear language. But if you go down to the mental health therapy toolkit, you really can look at it and see the first page that Christine talked about, ways that you could fill in and just start that conversation before you even go to any one of your providers. And then the therapy helper tools also just have a lot of ways for you to make sure, maybe thinking about planning ahead for a visit. How am I feeling? What do I want to talk about so that an individual doesn't feel put on the spot? And then also just helping them and their therapist make sure they're on the same page about what they talked about. So there's a lot of great tools. I also saw someone in the chat put the IDD toolkit that is available for healthcare. That's another great resource. So there's a lot of really great potential and different resources that are out there. And hopefully you guys can try some and see if they're useful for all of you. One thing, we have a video. I don't think that we necessarily have time to play our video, but our group at the Neiswanger Center, in addition to the work that we're doing around clear language products and working with making therapy more accessible for adults with ID, we're also working on studying assessments and really trying to develop self-report assessments for adults with ID to talk about their health, their well-being, and their mental health. And so I will encourage you, we're still recruiting for folks that might be interested to talk about their health
and what means to them. And you see Stacy just put the link in the chat. If it's a study that usually what we do is we have a study partner, so a parent or a caregiver and the adult with ID talk about things like their health and well-being. If that's something that you might be interested in, I invite you to click that link and sign up, and some of our study team members can talk to you about that. But yeah, thanks so much for listening to us today. I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over, and we have Max and Carly who are going to take us through our group exercise.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for having me do this. Just to reintroduce myself, I'm Max. I am the Outreach Director for Green Mountain Self Advocates. And I am a Black man with black hair. And I'm wearing a dress shirt, which is white with light blue thin stripes with a black tie. And the background I have is just, a white background with the Link Center logo on the top right corner. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a group exercise. And the way this is going to work is it's going to be me reading a scenario. And your job is to listen to the scenario. Then what we're going to do is we're going to just ask you to kind of think and then come up with answers on how to deal with the scenario as if it were a real situation. And you can put your answers in the chat. We will definitely watch for the chat. But even if you would like, you can, just raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can just say your answers out loud. So either or, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And this is also just a way for us to learn from you. And so on that note, we could get started. I don't know if Carly, you wanted to say anything to introduce yourself, unless.
Sure. My name is Carly Winnie. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at NAD, an association for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and co-occurring mental health conditions.
All right. Well, thank you very much. All right. So without further ado, let's get going with the scenario. And again, whatever you come up with for answers, you can come up with in the chat or just say them out loud and we'll come and unmute you. Alrighty, so here we go. Harold uses a speech generating app on his phone to help with communication, especially when he is stressed or anxious. While he understands that his therapist is helping him to cope with his anxiety, it is sometimes hard for him to find the words and to answer questions or communicate what he is thinking or feeling, so he uses the app during most of the session. Harold just started seeing this therapist, and the sessions are only 1 hour every other week. The therapist feels like they are not making progress and that they don't have enough time together because it takes time for Harold to type into his phone what he wants to say. Are there things that Harold and or the therapist can do before, during, or after the appointment that would help them make the most of the time they have together? And was there something that Harold could do or Harold could have done before meeting with the therapist for the first time?
Again, we encourage you to raise your hand, then come off mute if you want, or type your questions into the chat. We want to know your thoughts so we can elevate those things and bring them up through the Link Center.
I cannot find the hand raising. Oh, good. We have a participant. So they can share first. And I can't find the hand raising, but I have a thought too afterwards.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Kyoko from New Jersey. One thing I think we can do is that therapists can probably give him some assignment, journaling like when he gets anxious, and also probably can give him pre-session questions so that he can come prepared to answer those questions, and also give her journals to show when, like, what is the trigger and how he copes it, and then how he felt about it.
Yeah.
So Janet shared this therapist could share a list of questions prior to the session so that Harold could type out his answers ahead of time. And Stacy added a link to the My Healthcare Visit form that could be used beforehand for Harold to organize his thoughts.
All right. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? So I think I got something in chat, unless you said it already. Yeah, this healthcare visit from that Janet shared. Yeah, filling it out beforehand would be helpful for Harold to organize his thoughts. I also got this other one in chat. The therapist could share a list of questions prior to the session so that Harold could type out his answers ahead of time. That's good. Anybody else? Also, Harold could have explained to his therapist before they met initially that this is an accommodation that he needs, and ask how much time might be needed.
Yeah, this is Andrea. I was thinking the same thing, Janet, talking about maybe can we make appointments longer, or thinking of this as accommodation. The other thing that I am wondering about in this case, we hear about what the therapist thinks about progress, but I'm wondering if anyone has given Harold the opportunity to talk about what he thinks about how progress is going. And I'm just wondering from the communication side of what are their goals? Have they made sure that both of them have aligned goals? And just thinking that through. Maybe the therapist could work on building rapport and some of these other things that might help both of them feel a bit more comfortable.
Yep. Anybody else? Any other thoughts about what Harold or the therapist can do to make the appointments better, help him make it more easier? Maybe something that you may suggest or think about what Harold could do, or maybe the therapist themselves again. I'm not a therapist, but I think that anything that a therapist gets from the individual that they meet with is always I think is an ongoing learning experience. When it comes to accommodations, it helps them find ways to kind of interact with them better. Because I think being a therapist, this is just my personal guess, is there's never like an end to like learning from the individuals that you meet with. Uh, yeah, great point, Max. As a supporter, I would talk with Harold before the visit to see how I can be helpful for him to feel respected and heard. That's from the chat. Anybody else? I am hoping that people are thinking, but I do not want to force people to think of an answer if they can't at the same time. But that is my curiosity speaking. Question in the chat, does his app have all the words and phrases he needs to communicate during therapy? Well, that's something to kind of ask and also to keep in mind. Anybody else? So is Harold feeling stressed by the therapist? If so, what could the therapist do to make him feel less stressed during the session?
That's true. If he, sometimes feeling pressure to communicate or to type things into his app could actually slow him down.
Anybody else? Love that question, Janet. As Andrea said, building support and trust is so important in a therapeutic setting. Yeah.
There's also a comment there from Mary. Could the therapist let Harold know the topics for the coming week? So Harold has a chance to think about them and maybe consider the things he would like to say.
These are all really good suggestions. Okay. Oh, sorry, I put this in the wrong chat. Could the therapist let Harold know the topics for the upcoming week so Harold has a chance to think about them and maybe consider things he would like to say? Yeah, that's good. I think that it's good to have things sent ahead of time for the individual to, kind of think about how to go about it in that regard. So yes, thank you for that. And before I turn it over, I also want to say too that when it comes to an agenda, and this, I think also, I wonder myself if that agenda could be also set by Harold himself, because sometimes I know it's good that the therapist may give them what is expected to talk about ahead of time. But I also question too, just those topics could also be where they may have left off in a previous conversation they had from a previous appointment, and maybe have Harold sort of communicate what he would like to talk about and make the agenda. Because at the end of the day, I just look at it through. If I were in Harold's shoes, I would want my therapist to know what I want to talk about and why. And also just Janet, The IDD Toolkit has a resource for healthcare providers to hone their communication skills. It's called Communicate Care. Okay, so there's a link to that put in the chat. So thank you for that. All right. Well, I believe that we are getting close here. So just due to time, I want to just say thank you for doing the exercise with us, all of which are very good. Points and suggestions and advice that you all gave. Again, I'm a learning person, so I love to learn from all of you. And thank you, Carly, for helping me out with it. And I think on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Becky. So, Becky, take it away.
Great. Sorry about that. There we go. Thanks so much, Max and Carly. I think this was just a wonderful discussion today. Thank you all for joining us. Please do put in your go-to resources into the chat for us so that we can keep our website updated, and it really does inform us to understand where you're going for information about communication in clinical settings. We have just a couple of polls for you if you'll just take a moment quickly to help us out. The first is at the beginning of the session, we did ask you to rate your knowledge on the topic that we discussed. And now, after listening to our presenters today, we're hoping that you'll let us know how you're feeling related to your knowledge base. The second question is about our Link Center, which is a project of national significance. And because of that, we're really interested in better understanding how people's lives are being impacted through this work and through the shared learning group. So by answering that question, the second question, that will help us understand if you're able to share this information with your family members and the true reach of this important work. I'll give you just one more minute to fill out the poll. Next, we're going to show you our upcoming calendar for our next shared learning group session. The next sessions will be held in July and will be focused on suicide and suicide prevention. So really important topics coming up, and we hope you'll be able to join us for those. Also, check out our website. I know it was mentioned at the beginning, but here again is a QR code. We recently updated it, and there are a lot of really wonderful resources on it. So please do take a moment to look around there. The shared learning groups from today will be recorded and posted on that site, as well as other shared learning groups as well. Please also take this evaluation for us. It's very helpful for us, and your feedback helps us make improvements and adjustments on future webinars. And finally, thank you again for participating today. I want to give a very special thanks to Braden Gertz, Andrea Whitwer, and Christine Brown with the Nysonger Center, Tanya at Communication First, and Monica Wofford and Perry Spencer. We would like to thank all of our steering committee, as always, for sharing their thoughts and experiences. They are truly invaluable to our shared learning groups. And thank you to ACL for continuing to support this work and making this meeting possible. Really appreciate all of you joining us today, and hope we'll see you again at another shared learning group session in the future. Thank you.